In this lecture, we are going to see how we can manually control what type of meshing method that is being used by the Ansys Workbench software to generate the mesh on the given geometries. For that purpose, I already have opened Ansys Workbench software. I already have imported the geometry file that I have provided you in the resources tab of this particular course. So I already have double clicked on this model cell also, so that already I have opened Ansys Mechanical, and once I have opened Ansys Mechanical, here what I will do is I will go to the mesh, and in the mesh group I will just right click and say insert, and here there is an option called method. So once I select this particular option called method, it will ask me to select the geometries to which this particular method will be applied. And remember, this can globally applied by selecting all the geometries that are present in this particular graphics window, or let us say particular session of the project, or otherwise you can also individually select each components to define different methods to different components. That means both the globalized control as well as localized control is possible with this particular option. So if I want a globalized effect of this particular method option, what I will do is I will go to the geometry selection cell. I'll just click on this, and now what I will do is I will select both the, by pressing Ctrl, I will select both the geometries. So whatever the method I am going to select, it is going to apply to both of these particular objects. This is how we can use this option at a global level. If you want it at a local level, instead of selecting all the geometries, what you are going to do is you will select only one geometry and say apply. So now you are changing this method only to the local level, where this method will only be applied to the geometry selected. Okay, for now what I will do is I will select both of these bodies. So I will click apply. I will just select it by pressing Ctrl and apply. Okay, now see, two bodies have been selected. Now if you see, by default the method is automatic method. Automatic method means there are 4 to 5 methods that are available inside Ansys Workbench software. So the software, the computer itself, automatic mesher algorithm itself, it will select any of the method, but I don't want to let it select. I want to select with what kinds of elements I want to mesh. So for that purpose I will come down here and I will change the method from automatic to tetrahedrons. If I select this tetrahedrons option, what will be the result means if I generate the mesh, all these bodies will be meshed with tetrahedral elements or pyramid elements, 3D triangular elements, because these are 3D objects. If it is a 2D objects, it will be triangles. So you can just right click and say generate mesh, and you will be able to visually see that both of these particular geometries have been filled with tetrahedral elements. Right now, if I don't want both of these bodies to be created with tetrahedral elements, I want to be creating it with hexahedral elements. So for that purpose, what I will do is I will go to this particular method, and instead of tetrahedrons, what I will do is I will select the hex dominant one, and once you select the hex dominant one, it is asking the element order. As I already previously told you, it's a hexahedral mesh, you have to go for linear one. That is an usual practice in industry. So I will set to linear. And free face meshing, there is something called free face meshing type, which we are going to see. For now, what I will do is first I will generate the mesh and show you the difference. And remember, the hexahedral mesh will take some time, so don't worry. It is done, but if we are able to see here, the mesher has failed to generate all hexahedral elements, especially on this particular object, And remember one thing is creating hexahedral elements, that too with automatic mesher, even though you do that, it won't do much good, because hexahedral meshing is a very complicated thing, and remember, it involves a lot of manual tasks like splitting the body to make it sweepable, and making it there are other lot of geometrical things you need to do before getting a hexahedral mesh. And in industry also, for initial stages we don't go for the hexahedral mesh. Initially what we'll do is we'll simply go with the tetrahedral mesh. We carry out a basic analysis, we'll try to find out critical areas and other things, and once we are done with all the basic steps, then if we are going for the final steps, then we will see whether we'll have we can get a hexahedral mesh or not. And remember, it's very tedious task, and it's a manual task. No automatic mesher in any of the available softwares at current stages can efficiently do that. It can be generating some arbitrary mesh which will contain a combination of tetrahedrons as well as hexahedrons, but it won't be, and not even 50% of this hexahedral mesh is good. So if you go to this hex dominant method, here free face meshing, you can either select all quad or quad or tria. So what will happen is, here first the software will select one face, and on that particular face it will create a mesh. So if I select quad and tria, what it will do is it will generate a mesh containing both quads and trias, and once it has generated that particular mesh, it will expand that mesh throughout the entire body. So don't worry, you need to know a lot of theory regarding this, and especially as I told you, generating hexahedral mesh involves a lot of options, a lot of theory that you need to know before doing all these things. So for initial knowledge only I am teaching you this. Then coming to the next option of all quad. All quad means it will try to generate a mesh which contains only quad elements. They should not contain triangular elements, and that is why if you are able to see on this particular body, with whatever the hexadominant mesh we have selected, it has failed. But if I just select only this object, because from experience and from simply seeing we can say this is a sweepable mesh object, so it can more efficiently generate hexahedral mesh. So what I will do is I will go and select only this body and press apply. Now you see generate a mesh. Now generate a mesh, what will happen is, here hexahedral mesh will be appearing, and whatever the failed mesh is there, it will change into normal mesh which contains all tetrahedrons. See, it has tetrahedrons. But here you are able to see one message. So see here, it is telling all quad free faces mesh type was chosen, but some triangles were created during meshing. So in order to create this mesh, all quad mesh, it was not possible. So that is why at some areas, to fill in that areas, it has the automatic mesher has created some triangles. It is showing us that warning, so that we will be aware of the fact that some trias are also present inside this geometry. And you can use localized refinement options here to again define this particular let us say this particular mesh. But if you are able to see something called as a sweepable objects, those objects can be somewhat modeled very easily using the hexahedral elements. Now coming to the question, what type of elements generally we will be using? For basic purposes, what we are going to do is we will be using a combination of both hexahedral elements as well as the tetrahedral elements. Remember, the results difference between tetrahedron quadratic order elements and this hexahedral what you say 8-noded or linear order elements are not much of a difference, so you can be opting for that. But anyway, while going for a basic analysis, we will have a mix of both tetrahedrons as well as this hexahedrons. And if there is there is a chance that you are only having tetrahedrons, there also you can define different areas with different kinds of tetrahedrons to get a efficient mesh. So this is how you can change between tetrahedral meshing as well as hexadominant meshing. Now I can also go and change these options to layered tetrahedrons. Layered tetrahedrons means as it is already stating, you are going to create all tetrahedron elements only, and tetrahedron elements, and here the element order is linear. will change from linear to quadratic. And remember one thing is, always if you are using tetrahedral elements, go for the quadratic order. If you are using hexahedral elements, if you are able to generate hexahedral elements, go for the linear order. Okay, so once you click here, you need to give out a few settings. I have to give the layer height. Let us say I will give a 2 mm layer height. Anyway, once I give the layer height, it will be able to generate the layered tetrahedron. But remember, you can't use the layered tetrahedron elements method with the adaptive meshing on. So in order to use this particular method, you need to go to the mesh global settings, and in the mesh global settings, have to go to the sizing option. You need to set the adaptive sizing to no, and once you set it to no, and now I can just click generate, and you can see all these particular objects will be meshed by tetrahedrons. That there is no much difference between a tetrahedron and direct tetrahedron meshing. But what will happen is, here instead of arbitrarily generating based on the shape and geometry, it will select a surface, and on that surface it will generate tetrahedrons, and based on that it will be placing tetrahedrons layer by layer, layer by layer, layer by layer. So one layer after other layer it will be placing until it is able to say complete meshing of the entire geometry. And I hope you had a little understanding on hexadominant meshing methods and tetrahedral meshing methods. And remember one more thing, in tetrahedral meshing methods, if you change it to tetrahedrons meshing methods, there are two things called as patch conforming and patch independent. And most probably you should be using, for industry purpose, you will be using patch conforming only. When you come to the patch independent method, it will be gone pretty soon, and I don't want to go into technicalities, but for our purpose, if you are going to use that tetrahedrons, you go for the patch conforming. But if you go for the patch independent method, one advantage is, wherever it identifies as a critical areas, it will refine the mesh there, and the other areas it will keep it somewhat, the mesh density it will keep it as low. And one more thing is, at the critical elements it will use higher order, let us say quadratic elements, and other things it might use the linear elements. But we don't want to go for that. Patch conforming can also do that with some additional standardized growth rates and other things, which I am not going to go into the algorithms and other things. So for now, use patch conforming. And element order, as I told you, for industry purpose, you use, whenever you are using tetrahedrons, you use quadratic element order. So I am going to right click and say generate mesh. So once I click on generate mesh, I was able to successfully generate the mesh on these two objects. So in the next lecture, we are going to see how can we effectively create a hexahedral mesh on some bodies through what is known as the swept meshing, and we will also talk about what is known as a multi-zone meshing. Thank you.